Well, hey guys, we are continuing on in our series for Wednesdays, trying to just figure out as we talk about preparing to not prepare for whatever's going on around us in the world today, right? So, for many of you, you're at home still, even though it seems like if you're at Royal Palms, lockdown stuff is going to be up soon. But we have been talking about to prepare. And is it a problem to prepare for things? You know, we've been trying to discuss about maybe a theology of preparing for what is to come. And so one of the last things I want to do on this is to look a little bit at one more example of something I find quite interesting in the Bible. And this one has to do with preparing for protection. And so, for some of you, you could probably take this a lot of different ways and want to run with it. But really, I want to look at a response towards preparing for what is to come in terms of danger and how it is dealt with within the same book by two different individuals. So this morning we're going to look at the story of Ezra, and we're going to look at the story of Nehemiah. Now, I just said it's in the same book, and let me clarify what I mean by that is historically, Ezra and Nehemiah are the same book. They were one unit together. We have them divided in our Bible, but they are one work. And so it obviously probably have a few different hands in writing it all. And we definitely see like Nehemiah has a heavy hand in writing things. We see Ezra writing things, but it's one work. So here's what I want to show you, and this is what I thought was really interesting. Is you're introduced to Ezra in chapter 7 of the book. Now, just to give you up to speed, let me show you a slick little PowerPoint slide I've created for you so that you might understand what's going on. So, as I open my PowerPoint, let me just walk you through. So I made this for you guys because usually if you're ever with me and I got my whiteboard, it's a mess and you can't figure out anything that I'm saying. But here's what happens in the timeline. 539 BC, Cyrus of Persia issues what's called the Edict of Cyrus, and then Jews are allowed to return to Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem was officially destroyed in 586 BC by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. So, the beginnings of the story of Ezra and Nehemiah start with the Edict of Cyrus. Now, the temple is rebuilt finally about 516, and so it's been, it's been 70 years that thing has been laid with nothing there, and 70 years later, it's back. The story of Ezra and the story of Nehemiah, though, take place later after the temple's been rebuilt. So we have 516 right here. And notice Ezra doesn't come on the scene until 458. Now, also, what's kind of cool in the middle of that is the Esther story. So we don't know, did they know each other? Who knows? But we know that takes place. The Esther story takes place as she is the queen of Xerxes, and then it's under the reign of Artaxerxes, the first, that we find the return of Ezra in 458, and the return of Nehemiah 445, and then the walls of Jerusalem completed in 444. Really quickly, as we get ready to kind of talk about these two passages, I want to just show you another map. This one I totally took off the internet. I didn't draw this one. This is just one. I guess it's from Geonova Maps. But I just want to show you that the kind of the traveling here is the red was that initial group of people that went and they left from Babylon right after Persia freed the Babylonians. They went and they went out all the way into Jerusalem. They started working on the temple, and then after you get that, remember this is the route of Nehemiah and Ezra. So let me show you on a Google Maps so you can see in real images of the kind of journey this would have taken. So here we go. So check this out. I decided that I would show you if you could drive a car from where Nehemiah was. But you know what? We'll just start. Yeah, we'll do this. Check this out. So this is Iran here. Look how big Iran is. Everyone forgets Iran is huge. Whoa! Okay, now here's Iraq here. Now, I just want to show you a little something else right here. Notice we've got all this green here, which means here you go. We're finding the two rivers that launch off here. But here is modern day Susa, or what's left of Susa, where Nehemiah is, and where at that time the emperor of Persia would have been. It was also cool when you start to like zoom in here. Here's what I didn't know. Like, this is all crazy stuff. Watch this. The tomb of Daniel, it's there. I don't know. I've never been to Iran. Would I love to see the tomb of Daniel? The tomb of Daniel? Yes, I would. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say I bet that's pretty legit and pretty real, because they've tried to keep Muslims revere many of the stories that we find in the Old and in the New Testament, and they've also preserved these sites because they look at some of these guys as prophets as well. But anyways, let's just do the tomb of Daniel to Jerusalem, right? Like, this would never happen. You're probably not going to just drive straight over like this, but imagine just if you could get in a car even, right? So we're looking at 1,500 kilometers for us Americans, right? That's about 800 miles. It's about a 18-hour car drive if you were going to go straight over. Now, they're obviously going to follow the river when they're going to do their trip, but this is a big trip, okay? This is a big trip that they're going to make. It's dangerous. It's got deserts. It's hot. It's also got lots of crazy different peoples that have always wanted to whoop up on them. Because you want to take advantage of the fact that you're in an area where you're off by yourself and you can pillage people and raid them and take their stuff, especially as you see a caravan. So they're going to follow the rivers closely and those routes that would have been there, and they drop in. So now we get into the story. Okay, here's what I want you to watch. Okay, so here we have Ezra. Ezra is a priest. It says he's skilled in the law of Moses, which the Lord, the God of Israel, had given. And the king had granted him everything he requested because the hand of the Lord God was on him. Some of the Israelites, the priests, the Levites, the singers, the gatekeepers, the temple servants accompanied him to Jerusalem in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes. So remember, he's going around 458 BC. The temple has been rebuilt already, and it's been placed in his heart to go and to begin to teach the people the word of God as he gets there. In fact, Ezra is probably one of the guys who helped complete the Old Testament. So here we are. He's in Babylon. Nehemiah is in Susa. So just a little bit further on. Ezra is in modern-day Iraq. Nehemiah is in modern-day Iran. And so they went on their journey, and he arrived in Jerusalem on the first day of the 5th month. So it took him 4 months. 4 months to make this journey. Okay? Now it says, since the gracious hand of his God was on him, Ezra had determined in his heart to study the Lord of the God, to study the law of the Lord, and obey it, teach his statutes and ordinances in Israel. Now, I'm getting to the part where this is kind of an interesting thing to think about. So in chapter 8, it begins to talk about all the people that went with him. There's a lot of people that went with him on this trip. And he's got people from different families that are coming in. You'll see here, you look at that. Now, notice what takes place here. Chapter 8, verse 15. Now I gathered them at the river that flows to Ahava, and we camped there for 3 days. And I searched among the people and the priests, and I found no Levites there. And I summoned the leaders, Eleazar, Ariel, Shemaiah, Elhanan, Elnathan, Jerib, Elnathan, and Nathan. Look at that, Elnathan, bunch of Elnathans around there. Popular name at the time. Zechariah, Meshullam, as well as the teachers, Juriab and Elnathan, another one. I sent them to Edo, the leader at Cassiphia, with a message for him and his brothers, the temple servants at Cassiphia. They would bring us ministers for the house of our God. Since the gracious hand of God was on us, they brought us Sherebiah, a man of insight from the descendants of Mahli, a descendant of Levi, the son of Israel, along with his sons and brothers, 18 men, plus Hashabiah, along with Jeshiah from the descendants of Merari and his brothers and their sons, 20 men. And there were also 220 of the temple servants who had been appointed by David, and the leaders for the work of the leaders for the work of the Levites. All were identified by name. Now this is where it gets there. So he's got all these people now, and these Levites, and they're making their trip. Now remember, this is a 4-month trip that they're doing. Okay? I proclaimed a fast by the Ahava River, that we might humble ourselves before our God and ask him for a safe journey for us, our dependents, and all our possessions. And I did this because I was ashamed to ask the king for infantry and cavalry to protect us from our enemies during the journey, since we had told him, the hand of our God is gracious to all who seek him, but his fierce anger is against all who abandon him. So we fasted and pleaded with our God about this, and he was receptive to our prayer. And I selected 12 of the leading priests, along with Sherebiah, Hashabiah, and 10 of their brothers. And I weighed out to them the silver and the articles, the contribution for the house of our God, that the king, his counselors, his leaders, and all the Israelites who were present had offered. So he's weighing out all the stuff, right? And he tells them, guard them carefully until you weigh them out in the chambers of the Lord's house. And then we get to this. We set out from Ahava the river on the 12th day of the first month to Jerusalem. We were strengthened by our God, and he kept us from the grasp of our enemy, from the ambush along the way. And we arrived at Jerusalem and rested there for 3 days. And on the fourth day the silver, the gold, the articles were weighed out in the house of the Lord of our God, into the care of the priest Meremoth, son of Uriah. Now let me stop here and just catch what's just happened. They took a 4-month journey, and Ezra has been blessed with everything by the king to be able to go and to do this. Now, before they set off, Ezra is nervous about the journey. Obviously, you're taking a lot of different people. You've got a bunch of people. This is not an army that's going back into the land, and we know it's not been easy. If you read the first part of the book of Ezra, it's been off and on of people trying to stop Israel from rebuilding. Okay. So here he is, and he says, I got to proclaim a fast, and we've got to ask God to keep us safe. Now, the reason why is he was looking at this as almost an apologetic situation, right? Here he is, wanting to take his people in, but he doesn't want to tell the king, please protect us, because he's already been telling the king about how good God is and how God's gracious hand was on him, who seek him. And he's saying, how could I tell him, please give me safety and security, O king. Our God protects us, but we need you to protect us too. And so Ezra's dilemma is, I say I trust God, and I need to trust him that he'll protect me all on this journey, because I don't also want to put out an image to somebody that I don't trust him. And so I'm going to go on a limb, and it's going to be hard, but I'm going to trust that God protects me and keeps me through the whole trip. Okay, so for some of you, you might be on this camp, right? That you look and you say, no, God's got it all. God's taken care of everything. And I just got to trust him with everything. And I just can't worry about it all because he's in control. He's got me. Now that's Ezra. Now, remember, this is the same book, but I want you to see the difference in the book of Nehemiah in chapter 4. So Nehemiah is somebody who was a governor. He was a very godly man. So you can't make the case that, well, Ezra is just more godlier than not. And in fact, the whole book of Nehemiah is him trying to lead the people back. Ezra is the Bible teacher. Nehemiah is the godly governor, leader of the people for the time. And so notice what takes place in this part of it. So Nehemiah has been getting there. He's been given everything to make his trip back. Remember, he comes just a little bit later than Ezra, probably about 10 to 13 years later than him. And notice what happens once he gets there. He goes out, and initially he gets there, by the way, and he finds that the walls are, are in terrible shape. He's allowed to go, and the king gives him pretty much everything. And Nehemiah is a very practical guy. He's like, hey, look, if you're going to send me out, can you give me all these things? Can you make sure that if we're going to go, I need to get letters to the governors so that they'll give me safe passage, because I need you to make sure the way is paved for me to go. And I need to make sure that we get all this stuff so I can rebuild everything. So Nehemiah is somebody who says, hey, I trust God. I need to go back. I need to help. And he's even showing, I pray to God of heavens and of the God of heavens and answer the king. So he's praying through this whole time, seeking the Lord. The king allows him to go. He asks for pretty much everything to be set up for him to go. And then you get to 4. So the walls are in ruins. He's dead set on, we're going to build this sucker. We're going to get this thing done, right? So then you look at 4. Now, there are people who are trying to stop the rebuilding of the walls in the same way they were trying to stop the rebuilding of the temple. So notice what happens. Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, and he became furious, and he mocked the Jews before his colleagues, the powerful men of Samaria, and said, what are these pathetic Jews doing? Can they restore it by themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they ever finish it? Can they bring burnt stones back? Can they bring these burnt stones back to life from the mounds of rubble? Then Tobiah the Ammonite, who was beside him, said, indeed, even if a fox climbed up what they were building, he would break down their stone wall. Listen, our God, for we are despised. Make their insults return back on their heads, and let them be taken as plunder in the land of captivity. Do not cover their guilt or let their sin be erased from your sight, because they have angered the builders. So Nehemiah utters a really cool prayer for these guys, and it's just saying, God, take care of these guys for what they've done to us. Okay? Now he's put that in God's hands. So we rebuilt the wall until the entire wall was joined together up to half its height, for the people had the will to keep working. Now here we go. When Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs, the Ammonites, the Ashdodites heard that the repair of the walls of Jerusalem was progressing and the gaps were being closed, they became furious. Why are they becoming furious? Well, they were becoming furious because now they can't pick up on the Jews anymore. They don't like having the walls up there. They wanted to be able to come in and terrorize them as they could, but now the walls are coming up, right? They plot together to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw it into confusion. So notice what they do. Nehemiah doesn't just take matters in his own hand. He prays. He prayed to our God and stationed the guard because of them day and night. So Nehemiah practically pulls guards out. He doesn't just pray, but he says, I'm going to pray, and then he stations guards. And in Judah it was said, the strength of the labor fails since there is so much rubble. We will never be able to rebuild the wall. And our enemy said, they won't realize it until we're among them and can kill them and stop the work. And the Jews who lived nearby arrived, and they said to us time and again, everywhere you turn, they attack us. So I stationed the people behind the lowest sections of the wall at the vulnerable areas. I stationed them by families with their swords and their spears and their bows, and I made an inspection. And I stood up and said to the nobles and the officials and the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord, and fight for your countrymen, your sons, your daughters, and your homes. Do you get this? A little bit more, and we'll finish talking about it. When our enemies heard that we knew their scheme and that God had frustrated it, every one of us returned to his own work on the wall. And from that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half held spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers supported all the people of Judah who were building the wall, and the laborers who carried the loads worked with the one hand and held a weapon in the other. Each of the builders had his sword strapped around his waist while he was building, and the trumpeter was beside me. And then I said to the nobles and the officials and the rest of the people, the work is enormous and spread out, and we are separated far from one another along the wall. Whenever you hear the trumpet sound, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. So we continued the work, while half of the men were holding spears from daybreak until the stars came out. And at that time I said to the people, let everyone and his servant spend the night inside Jerusalem, so that they can stand guard by night and work by day. And I and my brothers, my servants, and the men of the guard with me never took off our clothes. Each carried his weapon, even when washing. So interesting approach, right? So Nehemiah, granted, that doesn't say that Ezra wasn't opposed to using guards. I'm sure they had all their own stuff as they were going, but I think it's just a difference, just something important to see is here you have one model of Ezra who says, we seek the Lord, we're going to let God take care of it all. Then you have the Nehemiah approach, and Nehemiah is a godly individual who throughout the book is trying to draw the people close to God. And Nehemiah's approach is we seek the Lord, and yet we also prepare, and we've also got to have a weapon with us all the time and be ready to fight. And so the reason I throw this out here is because I think at some point there is an approach that we just need to take, which is at the center of this all, we trust God. At the center of this all, we pray and we ask that God take care of things for us. I think there's a lot of liberty, though, within the Christian world and the Christian mindset and your relationship between you and the Lord, which is do I take extra precautions or not? It was through the precautions of Nehemiah that Israel was safe. It was through the precautions of Ezra that Israel was safe. And so I don't think the Bible is not telling us that one approach was wrong or the other. These are different way they were wired, and yet God honors both of those. So I don't think the answer is because on one side you're going to say, see, they probably didn't need to do that. They just prayed hard enough. They trusted God. But no, even Ezra is saying, this is how we trust God on this. We trust God. God's going to fight for us while they got a weapon in one hand. And so I'm not saying Ezra's a pacifist at all. No, because this is all going on while Ezra's there. Ezra could have said, hey guys, why don't we? No, that's not what's saying at all. I'm just saying two different approaches, two different understandings of how you might approach danger and things coming your way. And so in one regard, Ezra, when it came to the fighting piece, trusted that God was going to give them safe passage all the way through, and they prayed and sought God on that. Nehemiah, when it comes to the fighting piece, trusted God and yet also took precautions. So there is no right answer in terms of, are you bad because you want to take precautions, and are you less spiritual because you do or not? I think at the end of the day, if you're trusting God the way you see someone like a Nehemiah trusting God, and you want to take precautions, then go for it. Remember, just don't go crazy and just begin to trust in your own ways and your own way to get it out. You trust God that it's only going to be because God is going to use these things that you'll be taken care of. Not that you do it yourself. And if you don't, and you just trust God fully on that, then trust God. Don't be dumb, but trust God through it. Let me say one more thing, and then we'll be done. Just a second. I wanted to skip over to Psalm 127, which is a psalm that we actually have as one of our values. It's a verse a passage that backs up one of our values on the discussion of family. And we talk about it here because of the verses specifically in verses 3 through 5 about how children are a heritage from the Lord. But I want you to notice what the psalmist says right here. This is what Solomon says. Unless the Lord builds a house, its builders labor over it in vain. Unless the Lord watches over a city, the watchman stays alert in vain. In vain you get up early and stay up late, working hard to have enough food. Yes, he gives sleep to the one he loves. And I think that really captures everything we've been trying to say over these past few weeks, which is this: unless you bring God into this, you're going to be doing it wrong. So if you just decide that you're going to do this and take this on, and you're going to take care of yourself and not trust God, you're doing it wrong, Christian. If you're somebody who says, I'm going to trust God in all of this, then that's right. Because here's the deal. If you take in your manner and you trust in your own security, you trust in your own provisions, that's not going to save you. That's not going to protect you. And who's to say that stuff will get spoiled, it'll get lost, it'll get finished up, and then you'll find yourself just completely helpless again. The only thing you can do is trust in the Lord. And what the psalmist is saying here is that you do this part, but you trust God in the end that God's going to take care of it. That's what you do. See, these guys are building a building. They're building a house, but it only matters as if God is the one building the house, not you, because you're going to be building, but God is the one who's going to do the work there. And so I think there's a good balance that Ezra and Nehemiah bring us in terms of approach, at least from those passages, about how we trust God with what we do. And I think these are great verses here. Unless the Lord builds a house, its builders labor over it in vain. Unless the Lord watches over a city, the watchman stays alert in vain. In vain you get up early and stay up late, working hard to have enough food, and yes, he gives sleep to the one he loves. If you're trusting in that security system, if you're trusting in whatever you trust in to take care of you, and you don't ask God to be involved in that at all, you're doing it in vain. You're trusting in something that's going to let you down. At the end of the day, the only reason that stuff is going to work, the only reason that's going to stay on, the only reason you're going to be safe is because it's in the hand of God to take care of that in the first place. And that's where you go give your attention to first. All right, we are done here. And starting next week, we'll do another study like this. Guys, don't forget to like and to subscribe. And whatever you would like, topics you want to take on, let's take them on, have a little fun for especially the summer. Give me some of that stuff that you want me to take on. You can put it in the comments. You can email me or send me a text as well. All right, until then, take care, guys. Be safe. And we are not sponsored by Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies, but wouldn't it be nice if we were? Not that they want to be in the Bible teaching sponsorship, but if they ever were, if they ever became like, we're going to sponsor you, that would be awesome. I got one last one here. I got a fresh box up on the shelf. Don't worry. I'm okay. I'm stocked up. I'm ready for at least the next 2 days. Okay, talk to you guys later. Hang in there. See you later.